Shadows creep around us, silent whispers call. In the dark we wander, lost within it all. Night air is heavy, breath that frees the soul. Echoes in the distance, stories left untold. Whispers of the night, drawing near and tight. Secrets in the shadows, hidden from the light.
Warning. The following program may contain content that can be disturbing and/or graphic in nature. Viewer discretion advised.
Hey there, true believers. Thanks for coming back with another episode of Monstrous The Podcast. I hope everybody's doing well tonight, and we've got another new guest who's got some exciting stories that she wants to share with us. Miss Aleera, how are you doing tonight?
Wonderful. Thank you for having me here.
We're very happy to have you here. So if you would, if you don't care, just give us a little bit of a bio on yourself, if you don't mind.
I'm 32. I live in Texas, and a lot of my encounters that I'll be talking about today are primarily based in Texas, primarily up in North Texas. This happened between 2005 and 2010 while I was in high school. Since then, I've kind of moved around a lot throughout Texas, and a couple of my stories will be in South Texas in the Corpus Christi area as well. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, sounds great. So if you want to, just go ahead and you can jump into the first story. And like I said, I'm going to let you just run with it. You're going to tell us whatever happened from the beginning. Give us as much detail as you can. And if there's any way I can help you out, just let me know.
Alrighty. Well, in 2005, I had moved to the Denton, Texas area after my mom had retired from the military. I was a really awkward kid, so I did have friends, but I also wasn't I was a weird kid, so wasn't liked very much. But I spent a lot of time in the woods and stuff behind our house, and I sent some pictures of points of reference and stuff like that to kind of explain the area at the time. There's been a lot of developments in those areas, so it's changed over some time. But there was a huge section of woods behind my parents' house that I loved. Like, that was my escape from the world. And good points of the story kind of circle around some unfortunate events when I was younger. I did suffer from sexual assault that did occur in those woods. And but without going too into detail on that, I do feel like the creatures that I had encountered had either witnessed it or had been around the area when that had occurred. My first encounter, I had gone into the woods and I planned on camping out there and stuff by myself. And it wasn't nothing huge or anything like that. I just had a tarp with a rope and stuff like that, just in a sleeping bag, and I would just hang out in the woods. And one night, as I was getting up to one of my favorite spots, that was pretty close to this little lake area. There's a lot of hills through that area, a lot of thick brush and stuff like that. But there's a lot of little footpaths up and down through there. And this one particular spot that I would go to, I noticed it got like eerily quiet, and like all the critter sounds like just were gone, and the air was pretty thick. And I remember smelling this musky dog smell. Like if you've been around, wet dogs, like it that's pretty much the way to describe it there. Um, and I could hear as I was getting closer to it and stuff off in the distance. The really only other noises I was hearing was other occasional footsteps, and but I didn't really pay too much attention to it. I just wanted to get to my spot. The area was also like in between two neighborhoods, so sometimes other people would venture off into the woods as well. But this particular spot was intentionally to get away from people, and so I didn't really pay too much mind to it. I get to my spot, I pitch my tent, and I noticed the sounds like as I was getting my stuff together and getting comfortable and whatnot. Like I could hear them like kind of almost circling, but like off in the like not super duper close. And at first I was listening to music for a little bit, but just that feeling of constant eyes on you and stuff like that from off in the distance, like um just made me not want to have my headphones on. But it, like I said, it had been eerily quiet. Like you didn't hear the crickets or God, the cicadas. Usually cicadas are screaming, and just night noises. Up North Texas is also um, known for a good number of different species of bats, and you'd hear them flying off in the distance, but where I was at, you couldn't hear any of that. And um, the smell just kind of just the closer those steps would get, that smell would intensify. And I was a little on edge just because it felt different. The paranormal has been a huge part of my life, dealing with spirits and just all kinds of stuff. But this was new, and that again, that feeling of eyes on you and stuff was really unsettling for a little bit. But I just kind of I didn't really. I tried to ignore it the best I could, and got a fire lit, and I was sitting there writing in some of my journals and stuff like that. I would bury my journals out there. It was kind of like a therapy for me at the time, dealing with a lot of trauma in my life. Just write it out, and then sometimes I would burn them, and then sometimes I would go bury them. And over time, I noticed a lot of where I had buried them, they were disappearing. So, like, it was obvious that somebody had dug them up. Um, but uh, so a little bit goes on, and I'm just writing by the fire, and these sounds got really, really close, like just on the edge of the fire, just outside the light and everything. I could only see like the outlines of these very, very tall creatures, and they had these heavy, heavy footsteps. And I was hearing grunts and scratches, and eventually again, part of me just was like, yeah, I was I was creeped out, and there was a part of me that was scared to walk up to these things, but I did. And the one that I had walked up to, so in my story, it was the female that I had encountered first. And there was some sort of familiarity with looking into her eyes. They were like this orange amber color, but they were, I remember being, to me, it was beautiful, but scary at the same time, just because, again, I could sense that they're a misunderstood creature. And being misunderstood most of my life myself, there was that, I don't know, there was that connection there. um, but I had some beef jerky that I had made and I brought with me, and I don't know, just part of me was like, huh, good offering here. I don't know. Um, and I reached out my hand just towards this shadow, and like I could see the outline of this creature, and um she was different from it in body type. Like that's kind of how I could tell she was female. Her shape was very feminine. Um and I remember what her hands felt like. And like, just like when you shake hands with a person, you have that feeling, and you can tell if they are, a good person or a threat, or not a good person. I didn't get any sense of danger from them. Just more of a sense of curiosity, like, why are you here? Um, so I handed a piece of jerky off into the shadows, and she snatched it from me. Not gonna lie, it scared me. And then she made these grunts and like clicking noises. I've heard the like dogs do it and stuff like that when they're communicating with one another. Um, and some grunts, just some like guttural grunts. And I could hear the others like in uh on each side of me, and one was right behind me. And so I went around in a circle basically, and I handed each of them, just kind of offered them a piece here and there. Um, Once the bag was empty, I dropped it and kind of sat back down by the fire, and they like went off for a little bit, and I could occasionally hear them throughout the night and stuff like that, but they weren't super close by and whatnot. And eventually, um, crickets started uh, singing their nightly song. So eventually I fell asleep, and I really don't know what time it was, because this was before cell phones were like a huge thing, and I was not one of the kids that had a cell phone most of high school. So I really don't know what time it was. I just know it was still dark. Um, but they did eventually come back after I'd fell asleep. And I'm laying there, and that feeling, when you're trying to pretend like you're asleep and your parents come in and look at you and like they know you're not asleep. I had that feeling, and um had the uh wet dog nose. Like I could feel them like sniffing around and sniffing some of my stuff. And eventually I even heard my book being picked up, and like my pages flipping. Um and that's what kind of like, I like opened my eyes and was like squinting and stuff. Um and One was at my feet, and that's what kind of like I kept trying to stay still. But I noticed the female like caught me like squinting and trying to look at them and stuff. And um, when she noticed me, she kind of like put her hand over my face, almost like when a dog is trying to wake you up, like pawing at your face, but she like put her whole big ginormous hand on my face and just kind of like rubbed her nails into my hair, like not hard or anything like that, but I don't know, just messing with my hair. And then they left again, and then the morning I decided to pack up and head home. And it was super interesting. But there was just something familiar about them in a weird way. Like they were, I would say they felt like young adults because in another encounter that I had talked about in another post, um, my third encounter was with what felt like an older, almost like an elder um, type. They but yeah, they had like a younger feel to them.
Okay, so first of all, I want to say I am incredibly sorry about what you had to go through when you were young. And you are incredibly strong and incredibly brave to have made it through that. So, whatever anybody else has ever said, whatever anybody else might think, I want you to know I really think you're a strong person for what you've been through. And that's not talking about the Dogman thing, the other stuff. I mean, just life in general as a girl who was in high school and went through what you went through. So my hat's off to you. I don't know what else to say, but you should be proud of yourself that you've made it through that. I also want to say you're incredibly brave because you see these things that come up to you in the woods. You have no idea what in the hell these things are, and you are brave enough to stand up, walk over, and basically offer a shadow a piece of beef jerky. And it worked out. And hey, I get that. You know, share a little bit about myself. When I was in school, I was bullied a lot. So I get where you're coming from when you're talking about some of that, definitely not all of it, but some of it as far as being the weird kid and not fitting in.
Yeah.
So in that part, we're kindred souls. Okay. So totally get that. And like I said, you have my complete sympathy, but damn it, girl, that is incredibly reckless, but incredibly brave too, to stand up with that piece of beef jerky and then offer that. And then, to the other, how many of them would you say that there was that night when you did that?
As far as I could tell, it was just those four. But over the years, I know there was a whole lot more. There was a whole lot more. Because my second and third encounters, there was rumbling, like heavy footsteps, and there was just a bunch of them. I never saw exactly how many the second and third time, but I could see the shadows jumping from tree to tree, essentially, or going behind tree to tree. So the second encounter,
Well,
I
wait,
I'm sorry.
one second. I hate to cut you off. I hate to
Oh
cut
no,
you
you're
off
good.
because I'm on the edge of my seat. I can't wait to hear the second and the third encounter and whatever else is going on in your life. I just got to ask you a few questions before we
Oh
jump
yeah,
into
go for it.
that. No, that's okay. So, about how tall would you say that these entities were? These dog men that you saw the first time?
So this group were like I would say about 7-8 feet tall.
Okay. All
Um,
right. And you mentioned grunts and clicks. So is this similar to things that you've heard? You kind of hinted toward it that these are things you've heard from dogs before.
yes.
Okay. All right. And you got pretty up and close a couple of times with the female's hand. Can you describe what the hand looked like?
It was okay. So aside from being enormously large, because her whole hand like covered my entire face, and um, again, I remember what it felt like. Like I'm thinking about it now, and like I can like feel it all over again. Um, I would imagine like Shaq size hands there. But very hairy. But like not like dog paws or wolf paws. Like if you've ever been around a wolf,
Would you
but
say that their hands were, I'm sorry, would you say
oh
that
no, you're
their
good.
hands are more human, more raccoon like, more, I don't know. I'm just throwing ideas out there.
So she definitely had like on the tips of her fingers, more callus like, and like on the edge of her palms. Um, they were a little more calloused, but there was like almost and they were hairy, like mostly on top, but she had these massive nails, dude. Like a really nice manicure for male, but the best, like, just I watch a lot of werewolf movies too and stuff. I'm trying to
Right.
remember the
Me
one in
too.
particular. Um, what was that one? Cursed. Remember Cursed with Christina Ricci?
Yep.
If you remember the hands on the mean girl beast towards the end, it's pretty similar to that. Um, but it was more human like.
Okay. All right. I guess in a way, I'm kind of asking you to visually describe, whereas you actually didn't visually experience it as much as you felt it.
Right.
Okay. All right. All right. Fair enough.
When she did get close and was like sniffing around my face, um, being really close to her nose and her mouth, I mean, was beyond unsettling. It literally half and half. Like there was something about her eyes. Like yes, they were like an amber orange and beautiful. They were beautiful to me. Um, but and her snout was long, and she did have like longer tufts of hair around her face and stuff. She had real high pointed ears. Um, and her ears were a little bit different from what I could see. Um, she had little tufts of hair that were pointed at the top of her ears, and she had more of a stripe from just between her eyebrows all the way to the back of her head, to the nape of her neck. There's like a darker long strip of like longer tufts of hair going towards the back of her head. Um, and they, from what I could see, they all did have, you know, like these real bushy tails. Their footprints were, good grief, freaking huge. Their footprints were all over where I was at that night. And one of the male that stayed behind me in the beginning of the encounter, he was a little bit larger than the other three, and his footprints were freaking huge. Now his footprints though mainly stayed around the area. He didn't really come up close as much as the female did. One of the males, I feel like he was probably the youngest. I don't know, I get Teen Wolf vibe right there. um he pretty much stayed at the end of my feet. And I kind of snuck a peek at him, but he didn't really seem to pay too. He didn't really look at me or anything like the female did. And he had like almost a gray orange set of eyes. But they were also equally pretty. And he had almost a shorter snout than the rest of them. That's why I say like Teen Wolf vibe, because he did look younger in a way. But I like I said, I got the young adult feeling of this group.
When you mentioned the tracks that were all over the place, what would you say that those tracks closely resembled? Would you?
Definitely wolf prints. Yeah, I would say very, very, very wolf-like.
If I asked you to compare the size of one of their tracks to something, what would you compare it to?
Almost the size of, I don't know if you've ever seen a lion's track or a large cat track, but it's about the size of that.
Okay. All right. That's actually a really good comparison. Yeah. All right. That works. That works. So, what I want you to do, take your time and go ahead and tell us about your second encounter. If you need to stop, if you need a breath, you just need to relax or whatever, just go ahead and do that. We're not in any big hurry. Tell the story the way you want to tell it.
Okay. So my second encounter, it was a rough day. Not gonna lie. Earlier that day, I had suffered the sexual assault, and then things just kind of went sour from there. And I went to my safe place, which was the woods, and I decided to just run like Forrest Gump through the woods until I got tired and continued walking. And there was like a portal that in this new part that I ended up walking through. And it was so thick. It was just like walking almost like through jello almost, because like the air was so thick, and like the whole feel of the woods, it almost looked like you walked into a whole different set of woods because it was so much darker. And I know it was still daytime, but like the tops of the trees and stuff like that were so much more dense that like it blocked out a lot of the sunlight, so it was really, really dark. And as I continued forward on this smaller footpath, again it was like dead silent, and I could that dog smell was everywhere. Another indicator when I was walking through the woods was the marks on the trees. So there was clear like scratch marks like on the trees and stuff like that. Sometimes they would be really high up, sometimes they would be really low to the ground. When they're between, well, I'm only 5'5", so but between eye level and a, approximately like 8 to 10 feet up on a tree and stuff like that, the more you see markings around, the closer you are getting to these creatures, is what I found. When you see a circle of trees with these markings around it, you are getting very, very close to their dens. and they are very territorial, but again, I've never really had an issue with them. As far as like being harmed or anything like that. They were more protective. So these two encounters, more specifically, that were in the woods behind my dad's house. These were like protective situations here. The second encounter, so I'm coming up over this hill, and I can hear laughing and people talking and stuff like that. So I quietly made it up this hill and like stood behind this bush and this tree, and lo and behold, it's that jackass who had assaulted me earlier that day. And on top of being mad about all of the situation and the outcome of all of it, then I see this stupid dude and his friends torturing and terrorizing animals and stuff like that. Those screams will forever be stuck in my head. That was awful. But that just added fuel to the fire, and I'm not gonna lie, I thought about doing something really stupid. But it's like they could almost hear my thoughts, because in the moment of just anger and rage, standing there watching this, I didn't even hear this creature walk up or anything like that. I guess I was that mad. And it was the first time I've ever actually heard it speak. Now, this one, I believe, is the bigger one from the very first encounter. And for a split second, I'm looking, okay, first, I'm looking down the hill, and my eyes are on them. And for a second, for a split second, then I realized something's next to me. And I glance over, and he is right there next to me, like an arm's length away from me. Well, my arm's length. His arm's length was enormously large. And like I said, it was like I guess I was thinking so loudly, maybe. It's almost like he heard what I was imagining there, because I was just full of rage at this point. And if you a way to describe his voice, you know how huskies are very vocal and stuff like that. Imagine that voice, but much deeper, and saying "don't" before getting palmed in the face and knocked down a hill. That's what happened. He said "don't," and then swatted me in the face, and I tumbled back off this hill. And for a moment, when as soon as I came to the bottom, I'm like trying to catch my breath because I knocked the wind out of myself on the way down. I'm looking up at him, and he points in the direction I had come from and said, "Go," really loud. But I can also hear those loud, heavy, almost thundering footsteps. And that was definitely adrenaline inducing right there, because at that point I Scooby-Dooed my ass out of there. And but as I was getting away, all I could hear was those footsteps getting closer and closer to that area I was just at, and I could hear screams. What was that? And then just horrible screams. And then I kind of like blacked out for a little bit, because I didn't really want to imagine what was really going on, but I never saw that dude or his friends ever again. So
Hmm.
who knows? I mean, I don't wish harm on people, so I mean, I hope they made it out alive, but who knows? But I do hope he got what he deserved. Whatever. But
Well,
yeah.
the universe has a way of taking care of itself. So, I'm
Yeah.
a firm believer in karma. So, sounds like he might have had a little karma coming his way, and it sounds like he may have gained the attention of a group of entities that he may not have wanted to get the attention of.
I believe so too. That is my firm belief too.
Yeah, and I think they, I'm sure I'm making a lot of assumptions here, but it kind of sounds like they adopted you, or they at very least they had a
A
they had
mutual
a
understanding of some sort.
a connection with you,
Yeah.
and I think that I don't know, I may be going way out on a limb here, but maybe they were offended on behalf of you, you know.
I deep down I feel that same thing. I do, honestly. Because again, like, yes, they're different creature, but again, a lot of times in the woods and stuff like that, I would speak out loud. Because I'm not a religious person or anything, never been really religious or anything like that. But essentially, I was speaking to the universe whenever I was upset about things and just getting things off my chest and stuff like that. And when you're speaking out to the woods, obviously you're not alone in more times than we realize. So I'm sure they heard plenty of my rants all throughout the woods and stuff. So
I sympathize. I've been there. I've done that. I still speak to the woods when I go out there, just to let them know
same.
my intention when I'm out there. But yeah, like I told you, whenever I was a kid, I suffered a lot through bullying and stuff, and the woods were my safe place. That was my fortress of solitude, and I could go out there, and I had a lot of yelling matches with nothing out there, so
Same.
I totally get where you're coming from. You got to go somewhere. You got to blow off the steam so that it doesn't go inward. So good on you for that, definitely. But yeah, that's again you've been through a lot, kiddo. So you know definitely you've done good. So yeah, go ahead and continue. I'll try not to interrupt too much
Oh
more.
no, you're all good. I love questions actually. Like, talking about this has actually been a really, really good outlet for me. Because when I was going through therapy and stuff like that, there's always that barrier that we put up because we don't want to end up in the loony bin.
Yeah.
So when you find people that you're able to talk to about this, like, there's that release valve of pressure, So this is definitely a really, really good release, talking about the paranormal. And so I hope to do the same for others as well, being that
Well,
safe space.
this is definitely a safe space, so you're definitely able to talk about whatever you need to talk about, especially the paranormal, the Dogman, whatever else you need to talk about with us. We're willing to sit here and listen, and we'll be more than willing to help you through it as much as we possibly can. And I actually work in the mental health community. I'm a mental health technician. I'm not a therapist, but I work with therapists. So that's what I do every day, is sit and talk with people and do interventions. So consider
cool.
this your billable time here.
Awesome.
So go ahead and take off from wherever you want to take off from, and we're here to listen to you.
Well, let's go into that third encounter. So that older entity, like I said, he felt like a much older, and he kind of looked like it too. Like, there was more gray to the facial hair around him, like a salt and pepper look. And he was very his muscle structure was very, very defined, and he had this massive scar across his right thigh. And I don't know, his facial structure, if you've seen an elderly wolf, like that's like the best way you could describe it there. Um, there was like a tiredness to his under eyes, even like he's been here for a while and seen a few things. Um, and he was much bigger. He was more around like 9 foot, and he had more of a serious tone to him. So I had again a different section of the woods in the opposite direction of the second encounter, but more along the creek and stuff like that. Before it was developed over in that area, the person who owned that land, there really wasn't a whole lot of markings over in that area that indicated that it was part of somebody's private property or anything like that. And that night, there had been a group of, I'm assuming to be hunters, but it was a bunch of dudes with a bunch of rifles and guns and stuff like that out in the woods drinking. So, and I'm not sure if it was like rabbit season or whatever, but I know there was a ton of rabbits around that time. So I'm assuming that's probably what they were hunting for. But I kept my distance because, again, it was dark, so I didn't want to get shot at. But I was coming over a hill when I could hear them, and then I saw them off through the trees. So I had the high ground, and they're in this like open clearing, and it wasn't quite a full moon just yet, but it was enough moonlight to really light up that area. And they're all talking and having a good old time, and it goes from laughing and giggles and stuff like that to, did you hear that? What was that? And they start making their way to the tree line on the far side, like opposite side from me, where I was at that point. And I started seeing the shadows darting from tree to tree like I had before, but this time there was a bunch of them, and like you could feel the ground rumbling and stuff like that. And for as far as they were, like that, you could just tell there was a bunch of them. And so they start making their way to the tree line, and I saw two of these shadows branch off away from that group of them that were just darting back and forth between the trees and stuff, and they started making their way towards me. So I start hauling ass down that hill to get away, and just as I get to almost to the bottom of this hill, I get clotheslined by this massive arm. And I'm flat on my back, and I'm looking up, and at first I noticed the scar. I noticed the scar on this creature's leg, and I'm looking up, and he had these very solid, like piercing gray eyes. Also very beautiful, but he was looking down at me, and he pointed. He didn't say anything, but he pointed over to this marshy area off in the distance. It was quite a ways, but I was having trouble getting up to my feet. And then I hear gunshots and screaming and stuff like that. And then I hear these people retreating. They get into their truck and they take off. And the wind had shifted all of a sudden. And like that's when he like snatched me up by my hood and started hauling ass through this like thick area. It was like a slight opening, but I was like hitting branches and getting scratched up by bushes and stuff along the way. But As soon as that wind shifted, the sound and thundering of these heavy footsteps like flanked towards where I just went down that hill. And once that happened, once they made that flank, he started running faster. And we got up to this marshy area, and there was this huge tree where like its root system was like, it honestly, it just looked like a giant hand. And like underneath there was this deep hole. And he shoved me down in there and started kicking like a bunch of moss and algae and stuff like that on top of me. That shit stunk too, by the way. And I sat there and things got quiet quickly. Like, aside from it already being eerie, like I could hear those footsteps, but then I could hear them going away from where I was at. So I sat there and I waited for a good while, like to the point where I fell asleep. And I want to say it was like close to morning, but still dark. When I finally woke up, and then I heard the crickets. And anytime I heard the crickets, like that was my knowing. Oh, and I guess the morning birds or whatever. Because once I heard that, I knew like it was safe to move at that point. And I did not go back to that section of woods ever again either, because that was a lot of them. And it just feels like, again, a protective measure, because they, again, didn't harm me and stuff like that. And this one actually, it felt like it hid me in under a tree and a bunch of moss and stuff like that. So that was interesting. Another point, or another little thing I forgot here, was the dens that I had mentioned. So in the third encounter, I actually noticed, or I'm sorry, the second encounter, because it was daytime, I did notice off along the path and down some hills, but like a good distance away from where I was at. I did notice those markings on the trees and stuff, which was where I kind of learned that, the more markings on these trees, the closer you are to these dens. And I believe there was a picture somebody had posted in our group of a bunch of like twigs and stuff like that, almost like in a teepee shape.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very close to that. But in them is this like deep hole. I only got close to one of them once. And like I mentioned about my books, my journals and stuff like that, I would go bury them. And I noticed some of them had been dug up. Well, one of these dens, I saw what looked to be a bunch of journals stacked up in front of it. And so there's kind of like, I know, but I don't know for sure, they were picking them up. But off in the distance, I saw two that were like, the openings were faced towards each other. And as I went further into the woods and stuff like that, there was like little random ones here and there. Some of them were tucked and then tucked in by bushes and stuff like that. They were smaller. But some of the larger ones were just kind of more open, I guess. And again, like those ones had the markings in a circle, like a circle of trees around them and stuff like that. And that was just the indication, like, you are way too close at that point.
Right. Right.
But those dens were interesting. I thought, I wasn't the only one who was camping in these woods, so I figured, somebody had to have built them and stuff like that. But the one that I had gotten kind of close to, they stink. They stink really bad. But again, that heavy, musky dog smell was around them, and some of them, even the one I got close to, it had like little tufts or chunks of hair and stuff like that on the entrance of them and stuff. The one I got close to didn't have any like fresh tracks or anything like that. But I didn't really try to get too close to it. I just close enough to where I could see into the entrance, and I could see that it was a deep hole. Possibly even like what is it? Like almost cave like, but not huge or anything like that. But it looked like it went down pretty far.
Right.
And it may have, I'm assuming here, but from the looks of it, it looked like nothing had been there in a while. So, but I wasn't going to mess with it. I just kept walking. And that was just on one major side, and that was typically behind my neighborhood and stuff at that time.
You had mentioned that around the bridge area, not too far away, there was a cemetery.
Right.
Okay. Now, where you were at in the forest or that wooded area, how far away from the cemetery was that?
Because it was right by the school. So I lived just under 2 miles away. My house was just under 2 miles away from the high school. So, and then the wooded area was literally right behind the house and stuff like that. So only a couple miles distance. And it wasn't a very big like cemetery or anything like that.
I hate to do this to you. We run it. I definitely want to have you back. I think you've got
Absolutely.
I think you've got a lot of stuff that you need to tell us about that I think would make great shows. But if you'll hold on just a second, I'm going to go ahead and do the closing on this one, and then we'll make arrangements to have you come back. Okay?
Awesome.
All right. Hang on just a minute. Okay, true believers, I really appreciate you guys coming by and listening to the episode of Monstrous The Podcast. I think we can all equally say that we are intrigued by what Aleera has told us and what else she's going to be telling us in the next time she comes on. And remember, you can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Rumble. We are now on Rumble. You can find us on TikTok. You can find us on Instagram. And don't forget, we have the group on Facebook. So there's Monstrous, and that's a big group where we all get together and we all nerd out over cryptozoology, the paranormal, UFOs, and different anomalies. And just want to remind you guys, make sure you lock your doors, lock your windows. Make sure you check in that closet, check under the bed, because monsters are real, and you never know when they're going to be back.
Whispers in the twilight, darkness and a breeze. Shadows move in silence, mystery in the trees. Secrets in the moon.